Render therefore unto Caesar's the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. If you're paying your tax with Caesar's property, why is he collecting the tax from you? Because you're using Caesar's property. If you were using God's property, God might come looking for a tax from you. But if you're using God's property, why would you be paying a tax unto Caesar?
And notice that his statement, because he makes a statement here. He makes a statement here. Render therefore, right? Therefore. What's the supporting evidence of his statement? Their testimony.
He used their words against them.
Therefore.
So look at verse 22. 22, wisdom. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left him and went their own way. They came to trap him, and who did the trap spring on? Back on them. Now let me ask you a question. Did he answer their question? Yes. But he answered their question by getting them to witness against themselves.
And it was so it's a mode of confession and avoidance, isn't it?
See, neither in form did he go into dishonor or as a debtor, and even in substance he did not ignore or evade their question. He responded as a creditor in form, and he answered their question by confession and avoidance in substance. So therefore, why are you guys filing a federal tax form? Can you already tell me what the answer is? Because your straw man used Federal Reserve notes all year long.
And give unto Benjamin that which is Benjamin's.
Okay? That's part of it. Let's fill in the rest. Okay? But I'm showing you in these two things out of Matthew, he's telling you, number one, in order not to create dishonor, let's go ahead and just go through the motions. Number two, there is a tax due and owing because you use Caesar's property, Federal Reserve, you use dead presidents all year long. And it belongs to the corporate United States, and they're looking at what you did with their property. If you did 100% of your straw man's business last year with dead presidents, what could the corporate United States ask you to do? Return 100% of them, plus all profits. And do they have a right to ask you to do that? You bet. You use their property. So let's see what we can do about it. Okay, we're probably going to want to try to expand this out to begin with at the top and then toward the bottom. This is a 1040 return. 10 is the number of law. 40 is the number of probation. Anybody that's had any experience with government forms knows one thing. The form is neutral. It's neither bad nor good. It's what you know about the form and how you elect to fill it out is going to determine the outcome. You can fill out the form as a creditor. You can fill out the form as a debtor. It's up to you. You have the unlimited right to contract. The government doesn't tell you how to fill this form out. It gives you the form and gives you the ability to fill it out. In case you're totally stupid, you can follow the directions, which will probably cause you to fill it out as a dummy defendant debtor because you're too stupid to fill it out as a creditor. But in any event, you'll get it filled out. Now, what is a tax return form? What is it really? Is it money? Is it title? Is it possession? What is it? It's information. But information in what structure? In legality, what does this form do or not do?
Pretty good.
That mouse really does need some cheese. Is it not describing property?
Yes.
What do you call an instrument that describes property? A security agreement. And what does a security agreement do? Who fills one out? Doesn't a debtor fill out a security agreement? And who does he turn it over to? The creditor. And does the debtor sign the security agreement? Yes. Which side does he sign on, the left or the right? The left, because he's a debtor. What does a security do? Conveys title to property. This particular security agreement could also be called a finance statement. What in particular does a finance statement do? Doesn't it list property that is to be used to do what? To be a surety for a debt. And all the property listed on the finance statement under the signature of the debtor in an administrative execution can do what? Allow the creditor to seize the property listed. So when your straw man fills out a tax return, I mean a security agreement, I mean a finance statement, all the property listed on there, you're giving the power to the creditor. Come and get it and take it if you need to. So under your signature, you're authorizing them to levy it or lien it. Do you understand why they don't have to go to a civil court to get that authority? You contracted with them. Do you understand why, since it's a finance statement, if you don't sign it, it's not a finance statement or agreement that they can execute it. Therefore, it's nothing. Therefore, they won't accept it. Therefore, it's not a return. Now you're in derelict of your duty because you haven't filed a finance statement, because it's not signed. How many people think the IRS is doing everything wrong? Good for you. Well, let me know how that's been working for you. You know, it's just like the foreclosure. Everyone wants to blame the other side. Look in the mirror. That's your problem. But the only reason that you're trying to squeak out of it is because you don't know where to find the coin in the fish's mouth. If everybody could get the coin out of the fish's mouth tonight before midnight, would you go down and file a tax return and not have a problem? Yes, you would. Why wouldn't everybody? Most people are lazy and don't want an argument anyway. The problem is they don't know where they're going to get the guitas to pay the tax, right? Because all year long, look, this is an instrument. Is the front of the return public and the back of the return private, or is it something different? Didn't we tell you? The front part of every document is public and the back side is generally private, if it's a payment instrument or a finance instrument. So what are they doing on the public side? They're listing the corp, they're listing the tax identification number, then they come down to filing status. Now after that, 6, that's the number of man. What do they give you an opportunity to do? Take some kind of exemptions, right? Let me ask you, exemption isn't a benefit? If you're taking a benefit, do you lose a right? Hale versus Hinkle, right? So, I want to take the exemption because I don't want to pay so many taxes. Oh, well then you just screwed yourself, buddy. Because now you got to pay. Because you took a benefit. See, the king is saying, you used my property all year. If I wanted it all back, I could ask you for every penny of it. But let me ask you a question. The king's doing business with everybody in the land, right? So they all got the same problem, right? So at the end of the year, the first year, what does the king do? He looks at everybody out there and says, I want all my property back. Send me everything you made this year. How many years, if you're not blonde, would you be in business with this guy? If you went to Las Vegas and they could rig the games so that every player would lose every penny if he stayed 3 or 4 hours, and everybody went home a loser, what would life in Las Vegas be like next week? There wouldn't be anyone there. And so someplace between taking everything they could take and taking as little as they might want to choose to take, there's going to be some level which maximizes the king's return. You understand? So he's going to put a complicated arrangement into effect so that he could convince most of the people to give him as much as he could extract from them, so that they start groaning and complaining, but not so much that they drop out of the game next year and he gets nothing. You understand what we're saying? But he's entitled to everything. So the first thing he does is he says, we're going to give you some benefits so you don't have to return everything to me. Oh, well, that's good. Then I'll consider working with him next year. Isn't that about the way the tax game goes down? And so on the first page here, you get certain exemptions and write-offs. If you want to take them, you're entitled to them. And then from line 7 all the way to the bottom of the first page, you're just reporting how many Federal Reserves ran through this guy's system that was called income last year. How much of the king's property did you use? Tell me how much it was. Let me ask you a question. Isn't this voluntary? Well, not really. If you used his property, you really ought to tell him how much encroachment you made on his property. But he's going to say, well, just send it to me voluntarily, and if I don't believe you, I'll send out my people to audit you, but I don't want to have to come out and pound you over the head so that you're going to tell me how much of my property you used last year. But if you get in front of a judge and you go, well, Judgy Wudgy, I don't want to fill this out. There's no constitutional reason compelling me. He's going to go, well, I'm going to put out an order and you're going to report this, or else you're going to be in contempt. Well, where's your authority to do that? Well, the judge doesn't want to say, look, you're using somebody else's property. He has a right, since he's your business partner under commerce, to get a report on what's his and what's yours.
And who's it voluntary for? Who's it voluntary for and who is it involuntary for? It's voluntary for non-citizen nationals who have no income effectively connected to business within the United States. They can choose to pay a tax to support the democracy or not. But any U.S. person who has income effectively connected to business within the United States or abroad is required.
Okay, so isn't the U.S. citizen person the birth certificate estate with the Social Security number as the beneficiary? You see where we're going? Okay, but not a problem yet. There's always a remedy notwithstanding. Okay, This straw man could have been involved in a lot of crap in line 12, business income. That comes from a Schedule C, right? So there's a Schedule C out here. You're in business, you got certain costs, you got certain income, and the bottom line on Schedule C is a profit or gain. You can subtract the cost of doing business. That's not a benefit. That's an accounting a cost, because just because you paid workers don't mean that that was a right you had, because the money got transferred to the workers. If you bought goods in order to build or do something in your business, that Federal Reserve note's transferred to the other party. So those can all be deducted, and the bottom line is a profit or gain to the straw man, right? And that profit or gain goes on line 12, and it's either positive or negative. If it's negative, do we want to ignore it? Or if we take a loss, is that a benefit? We probably don't want to take a loss. Okay? Now, what happens when you come down here to line 20A? Social Security benefits. The straw man got paid Social Security last year, didn't he? Is that a benefit? You bet. Okay. So, but isn't the use of Federal Reserve notes a benefit? Yeah. What the hell is the difference between the Social Security use benefit and the Federal Reserve note benefit? Is there any difference? They're still a benefit, aren't they? So put down 20A, Social Security benefits. Now, you can go into their books and put down a taxable amount. See page 26. Now, for the purpose of people listening, I think this was what, a 2008 return? If they're looking at the line and not trying to find what, the lines may be different. It's a 28 return, okay? So, are you going to only in line 20B put down the taxable amount as per the schedule, or are you going to put down the gross amount? Gross amount, otherwise you're taking a benefit. They're giving you a deferment on some of the Federal Reserve note usage. We don't want any benefits, deductions, exemptions, and deferments. So we put everything down. Now we add them up. In this example, it's $75,456. Adjusted gross income. Isn't the adjustments benefits, pretty much? So are we going to take any adjustments? No. So the bottom line at 37 is $75,456. That's the end of the public side of the form. We've reported the maximum usage of dead presidents, which belongs to the military takeover government. And it's not a tax on that, it's a tax on the privilege of doing business under that military government that creates the taxation. But it's a benefit of doing business using their property in order that you can make a living. Now, we already talked earlier this week. How many people can generally make a living without using dead presidents in the democracy? Like zip, zero, and nada. Because if you try to use anything except dead presidents, they presume that you're a terrorist to the democracy, and now they're coming after you, right? So don't they force you into this so-called benefit? They might be able to force corporations into something. Can they force people into something without their consent? No. Let's keep that in mind. Let's go to the private side. We transfer to line 38 the amount of use of dead presidents, 75456. Line 39, check if you were born and you're older than Methuselah, or check if you're blinder than a bat, or any other reason why we want to let you take a benefit. Do we want to use that? No. Okay, so they didn't trap us there. Line 40, itemized deductions. What the hell is deductions? It's a benefit to defer taxes on Caesar's property. It's a way Caesar can get you to pay something without paying at all, so that you'll come back and do business again with him next year. Otherwise, he could ask for it all back. But the game would be up. He doesn't even want you to know what we've studied already and told you. Because already now your mind is thinking, well, what's Caesar after and what are we going to do here? Question. Mike.
B and C are also benefits, right, for 39 B and C.
Yeah, if your spouse itemizes and C, check of a standard deduction. Well, any deduction or any exemption is a benefit, so you don't want to take those. Because you're deferring a debt. And a debt deferred is still owed, isn't it? So Caesar's asking you to accept a benefit here so that he can be the creditor and you can be the debtor. Is there another question or all set? Go ahead.
Hey, Jack, you know what's interesting? My straw man, it works for the state.
If you don't want to confess anything, just say your brother's straw man and we'll do third party here.
My brother's straw man, it works for the state.
Yes.
And prior to that, they wouldn't allow him to be employed with the state until he filed all his taxes.
I'm wholly... Are we going to file? You bet. It's not only my duty to not cause offense, but I'm going to show you that I'm filing as a creditor, and I'm proud to do so and help my country. Do you think that would cause some kind of prejudice to your brother if he learned how to file as a creditor instead of file as a debtor? Because they only asked to see his returns. They didn't say, if you don't file as a debtor, you're going to lose your job. The choice is yours. Hasn't Brandon been telling you all weekend? Everything is based on contract. And if contract is going to work, they can't tell you what party in the contract to be. Smart people learn how to be a creditor in a contract. Ignorant people just take what's left over. You see? All right. Itemized deductions. How many did we itemize? Zip, zero, nada. So now, line 41, subtract 40 from 38, we still got the gross income, right? Yeah. Have you ever looked up the definition in Black's Law degree between gross income and taxable income?
Gross is not taxable.
Pardon?
Gross is not taxable.
Gross is not taxable income. How many times have you seen a court case say, we don't tax everything that comes in? All they tax is what? Taxable income. How do you derive taxable income from gross income? Look it up in Black's dictionary. Taxable income is always also called net income, and net income equals gross income minus deductions and exemptions. So how did you turn your gross receipts into a tax liability? You put on your damn form, I want a deduction or an exemption. By electing any deduction or exemption on your form, you declared the gross income to be taxable. That's how simple it is in one respect. You did it by what you did when you filled out your form. You chose unwisely. But there were two reasons for the tax. You made yourself subject to the tax by listing a deduction or an exemption, which is just plain dumb, because you can't even read the dictionary. Or the second thing you did is you used dead presidents and you didn't reimburse the king for the dead presidents. That's the only two reasons why you're paying a tax. So, we're down to line 41, gross 42. If line 38 is over 119,975, or you provided housing to a Midwestern displaced individual. Brandon, you didn't live with me last year, did you? See?
Southwestern.
Oh, well then, I'm out. I'm not trapped by that one. See page 36. Otherwise, multiply $3,500 by the total number of exemptions. So line 42, you get a chance to create a taxable income again by claiming an exemption, don't you? So we're not going to do that. Okay, so now we get down to line 43. Taxable income. Subtract line 42 from line 41. That's because, presumably, you've taken all these deductions and exemptions, which is why it's taxable. Technically speaking, is our line taxable? Not yet, because we didn't take any deductions and exemptions. Okay? Now, line 44. Isn't 44 4 times 11? 4 are things of this world, the king, times 11, short of perfect government. You owe a foreign tribute tax. And on line 44 it says, how much tax do you owe? And you could check if you used an 8814 form, a 4972 form, or anything else. How much tax are we levying against this straw man? 100%. Why the hell would we do that? What did Scripture tell you to do? What did it tell you to do to Caesar? Give back Caesar all of his property. How much property did the straw man use of Caesar's last year? 100%. So we're going to give it back. Oh, but everybody's looking really weird right now. Why the hell would you do a stupid thing like that? Okay, what did we put in the right margin to the right of line 44? Can we move it over there? To move it this way to get to the right margin outside of line 44.
Zooming out. Here we go.
Or let's scroll over.
Well, I want to be able to keep the signature in there too.
Well, the signature's wrong. We'll get back to that.
Get the mouse to go where I want it to go.
I gave you 2 statutes, I think, yesterday, didn't I? I gave you 12 U.S.C. 411, write it down. And I should have given you 31 U.S.C. 3113. 12 U.S.C., that's banking, 411. Yeah. I thought we had it in the margin. It's up in line 44, though. There you go. 12 U.S.C. 411. We're stating a claim. We're justifying why we put the gross amount in line 44. What does 12 U.S.C. 411 say? Well, you want to go home and Google that. And you want to look at the first part, and it'll tell you what Federal Reserve notes are. They're issued by the bank. They're obligations of the United States. But the latter part of that says they're redeemable dollar for dollar in the District of Columbia at the U.S. Treasury. Where does your tax return go? Doesn't it go to the Secretary of Treasury? District of Columbia? Well, he's got outlying offices, but the parent company for collection of IRS taxes is the District of Columbia through the Secretary of Treasury, U.S. Isn't the Secretary of U.S. the alien property custodian? Isn't he the dude that has control over your birth certificate, estate, trust? In your birth certificate, estate, trust, don't you reportedly have the equivalent of asset funds if there has been an undertaking to convert your birth certificate security into money by way of a bond? And so the Secretary of Treasury, U.S., if you've done an undertaking, has the capacity to have the equivalent of lawful money registered in your account under your Social Security number in the District of Columbia. Let me ask you a question. You got Federal Reserve notes, dead presidents. How would you redeem them, and what would you redeem them for? If you took dead presidents to the District of Columbia, to the Secretary of Treasury, would he give you anything other than other dead presidents in the public? No. He will give you whatever is used as a currency, legal tender. He will exchange your $50 Federal Reserve note for 2 20s and a 10. But that's all you're going to get. Is that really a redemption? No. Why isn't it really a redemption? Because you're in the public and the public can't handle an asset. All it handles is more liability. So if you're going to redeem it under 12 U.S.C. 411, what jurisdictional venue do you have to redeem it in? The private side. Well, look, you're filing a 1040 return, aren't you? Isn't it going to the Secretary of Treasury? His agents are the DTC, the FRB, and the IRS. So if you're sending this puppy to IRS, you're really sending it to the Secretary of Treasury's agent in the District of Columbia to operate this return, aren't you? And why is it that you would file this 1040 as a debtor? Because you want to make beneficial use of the Federal Reserve notes, right? What if you don't want to make beneficial use? Why would you want to benefit if you could demand a right? Well, in order to have a right, what do you have to do to the beneficial use of the use of 75,456 dead presidents? What would you have to do to get rid of the use? You'd have to exchange the use of that for what? The equivalent of lawful money with legal and equitable title. Do you have that on deposit with the Secretary of Treasury U.S. in the District of Columbia? Yeah. So what do you want to do? I want to make an exchange. I'm here to redeem under 12 U.S.C. 411. So the first thing you're going to do is redeem the beneficial use. The beneficial use of what? All the Federal Reserve notes, plus all the benefits you gave the straw man. Social Security benefit, we're redeeming that sucker. How about unemployment? We're redeeming that sucker. How about food or whatever? If it's listed on this sucker, we're redeeming it too. Now, is it a benefit, or did you just convert it to a right by compensation? You converted it to a right by compensation. Question.
Also, if you have a structured settlement, do you also have to claim that too?
If you've got any debt with IRS going in the background for previous years, you better resolve those before you go into this sucker. Because you can't be a creditor on a half of an account. You're either a full creditor, or if you've got any liability to IRS for any year, you're a debtor, even if you tried to go ahead and redeem this. In fact, they will accept this return for 30 days. They will send you a notice. You still owe them money for all the other damn years all the way back to the date of your birth. And if you don't deal with those within the 30 days, they'll disallow this credit. Because you're a debtor and you can't access this payment set off if you're a debtor on all those other accounts. You understand? Okay, so 12 U.S.C. 411, you're saying, I used 75,000 in dead presidents last year, but I was forced to do that under the democracy. And I want to redeem these dollar for dollar. So I'm going to authorize you to deduct from my asset account, dollar for dollar, the same amount. Isn't that your redemption? Because on the private side, aren't they letting you have access to your legal, equitable money supply? Which is as good as gold. You understand? How did Peter pay his tax? Gold coin. How are you paying your tax? You're going to your gold account. How much effort did it take you to fill out this form? An hour and a half? Did you have to go fishing, dude? Did you have to pull a coin out of the mouth of the fish? Hello. Okay, now that you've redeemed it dollar for dollar, what is 31 USC? 31 deals with money. You're dealing with banking and money. Do banks on the public side deal with money anymore? Not really. They deal with debt. So you're converting debt to money. You're going from 12 USC banking to 31 USC 3113. 31 is the offspring. That's the sons of God. Who owes the tax? Not the sons and daughters. It's the stranger. So the stranger is reporting his use. Didn't Jesus say to Peter, go ahead and report the use and pay the tax? So Peter's going in and filling out the 1040, and then he's pulling the gold out of the fish's mouth, and the tax people are happy as can be. Now, under 31 USC 3113, it says that the U.S. Treasury will receive gifts to discharge the federal debt. You would put that right along with 12 USC 411 in the right column. It's a double whammy, because first you're converting it, and then what are you doing? You're gifting it to the United States Treasury. Why are you gifting 75 to the Treasury? To pay off the debt. What the hell debt? Well, weren't the 75,000 Federal Reserve notes a public debt? So what are you doing now with your gift? You're getting rid of the public debt that your straw man used last year. Isn't this too good? What the hell do they call the class of tax that's a 1040? It's a gift tax. And you just gave them a gift. What the hell is wrong with you people? Man, oh, shevitz. What a whine. Okay, so now that that's done, look, let's say they withheld some federal income tax. Are you going to claim it? No, why? Because it's liability, man. You're making a use again. Just let it go. It's another gift or whatever. Okay? So you're getting none of those credits, and the bottom line at 75, which is 3 times 25. 3 is completion. 25 is forgiveness of sin. I mean forgiveness of tax debt. And you're going to now authorize the 75. Where is it coming from? Your asset account. Based on what? 12 USC 411, redemption, set off, and 31 USC 3113 gift. Okay, the straw man, the debtor, signs on the left-hand side, because if he doesn't sign, we have no liability, right? So he's got to sign the security agreement. Now, once he signs that, what does that give the power of Internal Revenue Service for the United States the authority to do? Come and see $75,000 worth of Federal Reserve notes. Okay, but wait a minute. You're going to redeem those with $75,000 in gold coin where you've got legal and equitable title. So you paid the debt with legal and equitable title, which zeroes the obligation of paying the $75,000 privilege. Does IRS have a legally enforceable security agreement now that you have set it off? No, it's discharged the tax to zero when you gave them the gold coin, metaphorically. Okay? But wait a minute. You gave an indication in the right column that they could do that. Where was the signature authority? Isn't this a finance statement? Okay, can't we endorse the instrument for collection against your asset account? And if we endorse it, haven't we authorized IRS to take it to the Treasury and get paid from our asset account? So do you owe any tax anymore? Now, there's a mistake here. We have the signature vertically in, unfortunately, the left column here. Behind the signature as a double witness, we put the SOC number without dashes. The SOC number without dashes indicates the account over which the signature is. if they could clearly read your signature to understand it's the account associated with the SOC number on the front, you wouldn't need that number behind it. But if it's chicken scratching, you better put that number as a second witness that this name is that numbered account. Without dashes, because that's the employer identification number as a creditor, not a debtor. But it doesn't get signed in the left. It gets signed in the right column. Remember, this is an endorsement, I-endorsement, not E-endorsement. An E-endorsement is what? Public signature. What is an I-endorsement? Private signature. Is this a private endorsement or a public endorsement? Private, because it's going to your asset account. Now, if it's endorsed on the right-hand side, isn't that the same side that a check would be endorsed on? Because if we could see through this form to the front side, where would the sentence writing begin on the front? On the right column from the back view or the left? It'd be the right column from the back view right now. It would be coming across the page like Hebrew from right to left.
So the upper right-hand corner of this page, when flipped over, would be the upper left-hand corner of the check.
You see what we're saying?
Endorse a check. It's the left-hand side from the front. When you flip it over, the endorsement goes on.
But you still sign it on that.
On the margin, vertically.
With the Social Security number, without that.
Without dashes. Now, the Hornbook text on banker's acceptance is White and Summers. It's a Hornbook series. And they talk about banker's acceptance because an endorsement is banker's acceptance. It makes the signature party liable for payment on the instrument. And White and Summers says all it takes for endorsement is a vertical signature on the back of the instrument. Isn't this vertical on the back of the instrument on the right-hand side? Banker's acceptance. You just authorized the payment out of your asset account for the amount that you claimed you were going to be liable in order to pay on the finance statement. Now understand this. It makes sense that it's on the right-hand margin and not the left, doesn't it? Because is the creditor on the right or the left? The right. Look, the debtor signed on the left. We don't want to put our endorsement on the left for the creditor. The debtor signs on the left. The dual signature on the right is the endorsement for collection. Now, the next matter is, once you got the instrument made out, how would you like to proceed with this procedurally? Would you send it to the typical Internal Revenue Service officer for filing your income tax return? Chances are no, because this deals with a private set-off. What Department of Internal Revenue would you want to deal with? CID. So you would tender this to CID. Now, from what Brandon has been telling you about process, you may have to create a record. What is a record? Writing. Because everything they do in their fiction court is by writing. So to create a record, do you think you might want to have a process server send this instrument to CID so you have a record of mailing? You bet.
Certified mail or process server?
Whatever it's going to be in order to give you.
Making service of it.
And you want a third-party witness because you don't want to have to testify what you did here, did you? Because if you have to come in and say, yeah, boss, I signed it and send it, under those circumstances, you got to be a witness. And if you got to testify, are you the creditor or the debtor? You would be the debtor if you're testifying. So whatever you're doing with this procedural process, you want third-party witnesses to have to come in and testify, if necessary, in any kind of A proceeding or B proceeding, in order to substantiate the claim. If you're good and you know what you're doing and you can respond properly in form and substance, they're not going to test you more than once. After that, every year you're going to get by with doing this and they're going to file the forms. But the first year might be a little bit rough, because they're going to say, well, do you know what you're doing here, and can you stand behind it? Or did you go to a seminar and somebody told you what to do? See, if you're nothing more than a dummy on the end of a string, you're not going to prevail. You got to understand what it is you're doing and be able to articulate in form and in substance as a creditor what is happening here. Now, you tender this, let's say, to CID, and you might want to do some follow-ups if you need to. Maybe you don't. But what happens if public side of IRS sends you a letter, a form letter, and it says, hey man, we've been looking for your 2012 tax returns and we don't seem to be able to find it. What do they usually tell you on that letter? They give you options, don't they? What are the options? Number one, if you haven't filed yet, file it now and send it in, right? If you believe you don't have a duty and obligation to file, tell us why you don't believe you have an obligation to file. But on the other hand, if you've already filed your return, what do they want? Send us a copy of your return. Let me ask you a question. You're going to send this into CID, aren't you going to keep a copy? If the public side requests a copy of the filed return, can't you send them a copy of the filed return along with your proof of service on CID? And that ought to stop the public right there. Probably. Okay? Now, do you think we need anything else with that? Do you think we ought to send them a 1040-V with this? Do you think we ought to send them a money order in addition just to the banker's acceptance on the back? Good question. You might want to do that. We might have to do that.
But because you endorse the security instrument that has a face value on it.
This is original too.
Yeah. I would say you've sent them the payment. Now you may want to send the voucher, because with every payment you're supposed to send the voucher.
1040-V.
Right? So you may want to send them the voucher with it, but I don't think a money order is necessary.
You see what we're saying?
This is the money order.
Now, what have we learned out of this today? You know, there's so many different levels. Number one, I hope you learn that the reason you guys have been wandering around your whole life shaking your booty every time there's a knock on the door and there's a government car in the driveway, why are you worried? Every one of you guys are Alfred E. Newman. Well, maybe the girls aren't, but you guys are. You understand? Why are you worried? You are supposed to be the creditor. Why do you pay a tax? Because you either accept a benefit or you're using their property. But haven't we just showed you in our own statutes and law you can redeem the use? And you know you got the asset account so you can get the gold coin out of the fish's mouth. What the hell is the problem with taxes, man? It's the easiest damn thing in the world to resolve. But the other thing you got to understand is you wear different hats depending upon what role you want to play. Does anybody want to tell me that the straw man hasn't got a duty here? He does have a duty, doesn't he? But does anyone want to tell me that if you understand who you are and how you can operate, that it isn't a problem? How many people heard that they arrested Peter and threw him in prison for tax evasion? No, I didn't hear that either. It isn't in Scripture. So I guess the gold coin worked. And this, if you understand it, is going to work too. But it isn't going to work if you go, oh, I don't know if I really did this right. Do you think this is okay? No, if you don't have the confidence and you can't articulate what it is you did and why you did it and why you have complied with the law, then you're not going to have a remedy. And you know the odd thing about this is, when you file that tax return that way, who have you benefited? Everybody. Haven't you reduced the public debt? You bet. Did you pay your tax? You bet. Did the straw man get to live another day and go back to work? You bet. And you were just as happy as a lark. And I guarantee your spouse was glad that the IRS walked away too. So it's a win-win-win. But you're only going to be allowed to help everybody if you act in the capacity of a creditor. Because if you act in the capacity of a debtor, who can you help? Debtors can't help anyone. They can't even help themselves. So you don't qualify to use that process if you're coming on as the debtor. Okay, you had a question? You need, oh, he's got one.
Yeah.
Hang on, he's got one behind you. We'll get you.
Yeah, I got the mic. Now, it is a 1040V because that is closing out the year. You wouldn't use the ES.
That's a voucher. What does the voucher do?
For the payment.
Pardon?
For the payment. Or basically it's a notice.
Why is there a voucher? What is the purpose of that instrument? There's the money payment. What's the purpose of the voucher?
Well, it authorizes the payment and basically tells you what quarter or to finish up the year, which that would be finished.
Look at it as the vehicle which carries the money. When you go to the bank and you're going to deposit the straw man's paycheck, can you just throw the check at the teller?
No.
What would the teller do with the check?
No, you need a deposit slip.
You need a vehicle to carry it so it knows where it's coming from and where it's going to.
Okay.
So the voucher is the equivalent of the deposit slip.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
I had one more question
No,
on
you can
the...
only get one question tonight.
That's just one?
These local rules. Go ahead.
On the 31 USC...
3113.
3113, you just put that right below the 12
Yeah.
USC, just as long as it's in that right
Because,
column.
see, what's in the right column is your pleading. They're
Okay.
going to say, why the hell did he do this? And then you got a marginal notation. What does a marginal notation do on a legal instrument? Doesn't it
Reference.
explain?
Reference, yeah.
It's a reference. I'm not dumb. I'm here to redeem my instrument and give it back to you to reduce the public debt. I conditionally accept your refusal of my filing on proof of claim that you have the capacity to deny me a gift to defray the national debt. Is that in your job description, that you can violate the provisions of the statutes?
Thank you for the answer.
Yes. So when you put 12 USC 411, so you put 31 USC 3113 right below it then?
Yeah.
Because your example didn't have it there, but you...
No, because
Yeah.
we're always learning, getting
Yeah.
better and better. Tomorrow, you're not going to believe how good Brandon and I are going to be. We're going to have lights above our head.
And so basically...
We are going to have that tomorrow, aren't we?
Yes.
You got the special effects coming in?
I got
You just
pyrotechnics
put
and
that
everything.
notation on there, and they know what it means. You do not have to
I don't
explain
care
further.
if they know what it means at all.
Yeah,
Am I limited by their limited capacity to understand the law?
absolutely not. And that was for the voucher 1040B as in boy or D?
Be like a
Dog.
voucher.
Oh, B as, sorry. All right, got
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
You file a 1040 as a joint return without a benefit, without claiming a benefit? Is it possible to do that?
A joint return with your spouse? Yes. Yeah, just don't claim any benefits. That is, if your spouse is crazy enough to believe this crap. You know, if I tried to convince my wife of that, I'd have to shoot her to get her to put her signature on that. She won't believe anything. But she's Polish, but don't tell her that I said that. No, don't. There'll be another war. You know, the Polacks never start the war, but they're in the middle of every one, believe me.
So we don't put any marital status, we don't put any filing status? Or...
Well, look, the only way you get a benefit out of a marital filing jointly is if you're using the marital joint deduction. But we're not using any deductions. It's just no biggie.
Just fill out 2.
Let her redeem her own damn income, man.
And if she doesn't have any, you don't have to. The only reason to file jointly is, like he said, for the benefits that you're going to get. If you're not, if this, what he just showed you, there's no benefits taken on any part of that process.
The problem with that is,
there's no problem.
I know your pain. You don't have to say anymore. You got it. Okay, we got another question. Okay, young man.
Okay, yeah, I got 2 questions.
Oh my God.
You were telling us that you were saying
to us that if you do this form in your IRS, be prepared. Like 30 days later, they were going to come back and say you need to do last year, and the year before, year before, year before.
If you have been behind, if you owe something, but if you're caught up, you're good to go.
Okay. All right. So next question, since I don't work.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How many years do you want to go back and fix it?
I guess you could go back 7 years, I imagine.
No, you can go back to the first return.
Okay.
There's only a statute of limitations on the returns for what? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. That's what they're not telling you. They claim you can only go back 3 years on a tax return. That applies to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. But the 1040 return, you can go back forever. Let me ask you a question. Is IRS still trying to collect some taxes from people in here from the 1990s? 80s? 70s? Is that more than 3 years? What the hell makes you think that they can go back that far if they want to try to convince you that you can't go back more than 3 years? See, what they're not telling you is all of their administrative procedures apply to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, not 1040 tax return. And so there is no time limit on the 1040 tax. You can go back to the first one if you want. Well, you didn't even have to nunc-pro-tunc it if you don't want to. But look, what you're really doing here is you're redeeming the use of public credit for the year that you filed this return, right? Now, if you decide to go into Plan 2 and get control of your estate here, see, you have been taking public benefits your whole life. Every year you filed a tax return, even if you filed it correctly and paid, you took exemptions and deductions. You did not pay 100%. I guarantee you did not. Okay? And so you've got a whole crap load of benefits going back to the day you were born in the public. So if you're going to come back and get your estate and they're going to give you access to your units, you got to do what's called a chargeback, which means you're going to approach IRS and say, how much do I owe you? And they've got a record of all these benefits all the way back. And they're going to say, you owe us $3 million, $3,500,000. Maybe you owe $10 million. I don't know. And what you've got to do is you've got to authorize them to deduct whatever you owe to compensate the public benefit from the asset account that you're acquiring to get rid of the public benefit to get your right. That's called a chargeback. So all you have to do, if you do this year, and you're a creditor, from now on they expect you to file as a creditor. But if you go back and you re-get your whole estate and access to it, you're going to have to settle with them and do a chargeback, in which case you're going to take care of all those tax years way back to zero at one time. And they've got the books and records on that. Why do they want you to file a tax return every year?
So they can do their books and records.
So they can do their books and records. Why is that important to them? Because they're using your property and they want to know what they owe you. And if you're not filing your return, you're not telling them what they owe you, and they're worried that they're not keeping good enough books and records and you'll sue them. It's just the opposite of what you... I'm not going to tell them what I did last year because I'm going to have to pay them some money. What are you, an idiot? You're letting them steal your fortune from you because you won't report it to them? You people are funny.
I got one more question. So I don't work for anybody, but if you were working
We
for...
noticed that.
Yeah. Okay, but if you were working for a company, wouldn't you want to take the most deductions you possibly can from the company's assets so you can play with the Federal Reserve notes and then... So they'll give it to you. So
What the hell is wrong with you? Haven't you caught on yet?
No, I caught on, but like if they say, well...
Slow, real slow. Hang on. Wait a minute. How much tax did you pay last year?
I get all that. I get it.
How much tax did you pay last year when you filed this way?
Zero.
Zero. So what are you going to do on the W-4 next year?
Same thing.
If you don't work for anyone, you
On
don't
the
have a
W-4, doesn't it say, I want to claim exempt? Remember, every time you tried to claim exempt, IRS came down on your ass and you were a sorry puppy, weren't you? But now, look at what happened. You filed a tax return with zero tax liability. Why is there zero? Because you didn't have any benefit. So next year, you're working for Ford Motor on a W-4, you go into the office and you say, hey man, I want to fill out the new W-4 exempt. Well, I don't think IRS is going to go for that. Yeah, just, let them, give them a shot, send it into them, see what they say. Why are you eligible for exempt? Because you didn't owe a tax last year, and you don't expect to owe a tax again this year. Look, if IRS saw that you knew how to get by with that tax return last year without having an obligation, do you think they're going to go, I think he'll probably remember and do that again next year? So therefore, we'll put down exempt, so they're not going to take any federal tax out of you. Is that better than putting down 120 exemptions? You don't want to put down an exemption. It's a benefit. There you go. Okay, is it Miller time yet? Or?
It is.
It is Miller time. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. We got a half a hand.
There are several questions.
Oh, my God. See,
these are for you, Jack.
Chicken shit, get back up here. Oh, man. Okay, questions, and then we're going to wind it up.
Okay, so is the main reason, or maybe the only reason, that you're mailing in the return to CID because you are authorizing them to draw out of your asset account?
Okay, this is the way these weirdos operate. If you're a straw man debtor, an enemy of the state, a criminal, but you've been registered. So as a criminal, you're good to go and you can deal with the civil side of IRS. But if you're a responsible, alien, non-citizen, creditor, you're suspicious, so you got to deal with CID. So the good guys deal with the criminal agents, and the bad guys deal with the civil agents. Doesn't that make sense to you?
It's perfectly backwards.
Really, there is a form of absolute logic there. So because you're one of the good guys as a creditor, but you're not one of the evil citizens of the United States, who is an enemy of the state, you got to deal with the criminal people, which will then check you out and say you're good to go. So because you're a creditor on the private side, you deal with the really bad dudes with the guns. Whereas the rest of the real criminals and enemies, they just deal with the civilians.
Okay, so in that case, since it's established that I'm a criminal...
It didn't establish you're a criminal. They just suspect they don't know what you are, because you aren't registered. You may be one of those enemies of the state impersonating a creditor.
In that case, if my straw man is the owner of a corporation, an LLC, let's say, that files an 1120S,
Yeah.
would it also be wise to send those corporate returns into CID as well?
No, because they're corporations. The tax is 100% constitutional. Is it a 1120S, a S corp?
An S, yes.
Isn't that a pass-through?
No.
If it's an S corp, it could be. It depends on how the accounting goes, okay? But if it's a pass-through, the corp is going to file its regular return, and then its K-1s or whatever is going to report a tax onto your personal return.
Correct.
This is for personal returns, not corporate returns. You understand?
Yeah.
Because the corporate return is a fiction. They're a stranger in the land, and they're 100% taxable under the tribute principle. But when the income comes down to your straw man, it goes on to like Schedule E or D or something
It's
like
E.
that. And then at the end of that, it transfers to the front page in some respect onto the 1040. And we're only dealing with the front page and the back side of the front page of the 1040. The rest of the schedule accountings, they do exactly what they're supposed to do. And then they transfer funds up to the front. We're not going to take deductions and losses right off against income because that's a benefit. But other than that, we're going to treat the front page of the 1040 exactly like we discussed it. But don't try this on the corporate taxes. If your corporation is a pass-through, you're good to go. If it's a trust, it's a pass-through. Basically, you're good to go. If it's an LLC, it's a pass-through. It's good to go. You see the neatness of what's going on here? Does that help you? You got another question?
So if the corporation is a pass-through, would you still want to take the same tact with? I would think you'd still want to take the same tact as, normally a corporation is reporting both its income and its business expenses.
You could take those write-offs there. You could take any of the write-offs on the schedules you want. But if you're transferring losses to the front page, you're not going to deduct the losses from the other income.
Because those are benefits.
That's a benefit. But you can take business expenses off on all the schedules.
Okay.
Okay.
And then one other question. Would you do anything like this with like with a state return?
Now, the states are piggybacks on the Fed. Because remember, the states are co-business partners of the national government. The national government is the overrun military government, and they captured the states and the counties and the cities. So they're piggyback taxes. It's part of tax sharing, just so that the states and the counties have their own sources of income so the feds don't have to completely support them. I haven't gone through and totally analyzed what I would do for the states yet, but I would say if worse comes to worse, whatever, you start out by a gross income, usually from your Fed tax, right? So whatever the gross is on the Fed, which we haven't taken any deductions from, if worse comes to worse, why don't you just tender them again, the payment of the gross again to the state and the county? Let them have a windfall so they can help the people. You've got so much in this asset account. What, are you worried? Be generous.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Jack. On if I were to send this return in, notary presentment, certified mail, return receipt, and all this, and then would it be best to maybe courtesy copy the agency that's expecting the return so that they know what's going on? And
I think you're inviting a problem there.
Good enough.
It says file, but it doesn't necessarily say you got to file it to every Tom, Dick, and Harry is there.
No problem.
The request to the private side. See, on the state, what I would do is I would send that return on the state to the CFO of the state or whoever the treasurer is. They had one. They can operate on the private side because, like Brandon said, see, the state treasurer's office, they have an ACH terminal directly, privately, wire account to Treasury. They can do these things on the private side in a heartbeat. But if you're putting them in through the public side of the state tax collection, they're probably bundling a bunch of crap together and they're depositing them in a public bank. You see? And you can't deposit these things in a public bank because they're not a public depository unit. They're not drawn on the public banks. They're drawn on the private drawee, the Secretary of Treasury, U.S. Okay? Don't anybody do this until you feel confident enough to be able to handle legal and criminal charges under these administrative procedures, because they will turn a civil case into a criminal case in a heartbeat. And I don't want to hear everybody coming back, you told us to do this, yada, yada, yada. You got to be able to understand that you got to be able to push your own commercial process. We are not advocating anything. We are not telling you what to do. We are here for entertainment purposes only, which basically means use your mind, develop your talents, and know who you are and what you're doing. Mike, for him. Well,
I got a question. The 1040V, is there a special endorsement that goes on the back of that? And the front?
Usually, yeah, the back of that is endorsed, just along the edge again with a plain signature.
Plain signature. What about the front where it says the amount? You leave that blank?
Well, in this case, we know exactly what the amount is, so you can fill it in.
Okay.
Because it's exactly what, see, and the thing is, you're putting the blue ink signature endorsement on the original because you're filing the original. And so you're endorsing the original instrument at the same time you're always also drafting it up. So you've merged the liability and the banker's acceptance on the same instrument. Okay. If they brought that into court and tried to charge you with something, the evidence is there, you've already paid what it is that was the liability. The only thing they're going to try to allege is that this is a fraudulent or a counterfeit instrument. How would you respond to that?
I conditionally accept that it is a fraudulent instrument on proof of claim that is not.
No, you can't do that. You've created an argument. We're saying it isn't, you're saying it is. We got an argument now? Where would you like me to send the cake with the hacksaw?
All right.
I conditionally accept your offer on proof of claim that you got a certificate of protest from the drawee thereon claiming the instrument is not valid. Does that resolve the issue, or does that create further argument?
It should resolve it.
It resolves the issue because unless they get the drawee on the instrument to issue a certificate of protest, they have no evidence, it's invalid. Who is the drawee?
It's the Treasury.
It's your account because right. you did banker's acceptance, but who's the agent for your account?
Treasury.
Secretary of Treasury, U.S. Where did he issue a certificate of protest? On this instrument. See, and then they're, like I did yesterday with Brandon when we were playing, he's going to come back and say, I've read the emails from the Treasurer's office and these things are all a fraud. How are you going to respond to that?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, conditionally accept that and proof of claim that that is a certificate of protest applicable to this specific instrument. Because see, when he says the internet from Treasury shows that there's a whole group of people trying to do this and they're all fraudulent, is that evidence directly with regard to your tender of payment, or is that hearsay on a general class of things going on? It's hearsay, okay? Because he's never seen this instrument, and he never got any direct communication from the drawee on this instrument. So it's hearsay. Is hearsay permitted as evidence in their court? No.
Right.
But hearsay is a form of argument, isn't it? And if you come back and argue with them, isn't your response hearsay to their hearsay? So now by agreement we're playing a different role, and it's an argument in front of a public judge, and he's going to rule for the other side and against you, because you reduced your case to an argument on hearsay, and you're the one that followed the leader. You're your own worst enemy.
Gotcha.
I just did. Play back this tape later. Are these things helpful? Are you beginning to understand that yes, it is a form of a game, but it is structured? There are rules and there are procedures. You have to understand the substance, you have to understand the form, but we're giving you the foundation beyond all of this stuff to show that it works. But you got to make it work. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. You know, if I'm interested in setting off all the tax obligations that Stroman had in the past, over the years,
yeah.
But I don't know exactly how much. You mentioned that I can do a chargeback. Now, without having to know exact amount to do a chargeback,
Tell them you want to do a chargeback, and they'll tell you how much.
They will?
Or you can do a FOIA on every one of your year returns and find out what you should have paid them. Or just go to the local tax people and say, I want a printout of what the tax liabilities were, the income liabilities for the past 35 years. And they'll go, well, I'm sorry, we can only go back as far as 3.
Really? Because I have been filing every year. I've been paying tax. I mean, like Stroman has been paying taxes. You know, so I've been current. However, I mean, and they're like kind of, there could be like hidden, obligation that the Stroman have had in the public, which I'm not aware of or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Well, they're not coming looking for your straw man right now, are they?
No.
Well, there's usually a maxim that says don't kick sleeping dogs.
Oh, okay. So
But
I don't have to bother with the chargeback or anything.
But if you want to get bit on the ankle, go ahead.
I don't know. Okay. So don't bother with it.
Well, your effort is laudable here, but what you're really saying is you want to do the chargeback process. But the chargeback process is one of the processes between operating continuously in the straw man estate in the public and getting to the point where you're collapsing the straw man estate and taking it offshore privately, and the chargeback is one of the efforts that you do along the way. So why would you go back right now and just ask them to do the chargeback unless you're ready to progress farther and collapse the public estate, move the estate offshore into a private foreign trust or PIF, so that you no longer have that interface going on there. So the chargeback is just one of, let's say, about 5 or 10 things you're going to do between transitioning from operating the social account in the public United States to being offshore in the private. So learn the rest of the process and do it all at once. Don't just piecemeal it and say, well, I want to do the chargeback today, and maybe in a year or 10 years from now I'm going to take it offshore. Learn the whole thing.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Another question.
Yes.
Can you have documents signed non-protunct regarding issues that, let's say if you have filed certain notices but you need to continue, but you have kind of stopped and doing the whole process, do you need to start the whole process over, or can you non-protunct some documents?
Which process are you doing? Trying to fix a tax year, or?
Well, not necessarily particularly regarding taxes at all, particularly regarding real estate.
Usually from the time you start a process to the time you end it, it should be within 90 days. If it doesn't, it could be declared stale, and you may have to start over again. Okay, but that's just a general rule. It just depends on how the communications are going back and forth between the parties. But it's like in the check world, many of the checks in the check world, some of them will say void if not cash within 90 days. Some might go 6 months, some might go a year. But generally, after a period of time, an instrument does go stale, if not processed, and so your notes presumably are the same way. And then you may have to start over again. But if the process is still working and it looks like you're getting a remedy, you probably don't have a problem. Remember, contracts are dynamic. You could state in your offering that the instrument is still valid even though you've gone beyond 90 days, and if they don't object by agreement of the parties, then it is. Okay? That pretty much wind it up right now? One more question. We got one more question yet. Right here. Okie doke. What time in the morning?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. 9 is a judgment. Yay!